I borrowed the title from David Zhang. He has a whole series called China Fix Everything. It's true, China indeed fixes everything. Living in China for a while, you'll notice that everything could be fake, even mothers. And I'm not kidding. I don't know if David Zhang covered this story since I didn't watch every episode of his series. This is what happened. Years ago, during the Mother's Day, a famous tourist attraction had a Mother's Day promotion. All the mothers were free for admission. If you know anything about Chinese tradition, you would know that this promotion definitely would be a success because Chinese are demanded to treat their parents actually nicely. So lots of young people brought their mothers to this attraction. It was a great way to fulfill their traditional obligations. Then something weird happened at entrance. A young man showed up with 5 women and claimed that all 5 women were his mothers. It was ridiculous, of course. The admission staff knew it was a trick. The young man was taking advantage of their policy because the promotion policy didn't see how many mothers a person was allowed to bring. It was common sense. One person only had 1 mother. But you can blame the young man for the loophole. The admission staff asked this young man to call each of the 5 women mom, and they have to answer yes. The young man did it. He called the 5 women mom one by one, and they all answered yes. The admission staff had no choice but let them in. You can guess it. Only one of the 5 women was that young man's mother. The other 4, hard to tell, could be his mother's friends or sisters. But 4 of them were definitely fake mothers. There you have it. Even mothers could be fake in China. But there's something missing. What is it? Well, bell curve, also called normal distribution. Bell curves are going to be our best friends when we try to understand people's society or collective personalities. Pretty much everything about us follows a bell curve: body height, body weight, intelligence, sense of humor, etc. For example, let's see selfishness. Most people are at somewhere around the middle. Not too selfish, also not too selfless. Extreme cases are always rare on both sides. There are very few pure evil people, and there are very few saints as well. There is another example. Imagine dozens of people go to a guitar lesson. Everyone is the same at the beginning. After 2 months, most of the students will be mediocre, not too good and not too bad, and somewhere around the middle. 1 or 2 students will be excellent on this side. On the opposite side, 1 or 2 students will be very clumsy. They are just very bad at playing guitars. Now, let's go back to the fake mother story. With the help from the bell curve, you'll find where the problem lies. At the Mother's Day, thousands of young people brought their mothers to that tourist attraction to enjoy the free tickets. How many of them brought fake mothers? Only 1. Not 3, not 10, not 100, just 1 of them. That was the reason this story was on news. Nothing like this had happened before. It was a very weird thing to do. When we talk about the collective personality, bell curves are essential. In the last chapter, we talk about how Chinese don't know how to fight back. On the bell curve, most people are in the middle. This is also where stereotypes come from. Stereotypes are based on observations, only they don't cover the whole spectrum. These 2 areas are what are missing. The population in this area is small compared to the middle area, but don't forget, China has 1.4 billion people, so there are actually lots of people who always fight back, and these people will lead people in the middle. This is not just what happened in China, this is what happened in the entire human history. Bell curves also work on other aspects of our world. Let's see what happened to other fake things in China. On the bell curve, most products made in China are in the middle, with a decent quality. That's the reason the whole world is buying them massively. On one side, some products have the top-notch quality in the world, like iPhone, DJI Jones, wind turbines, etc. On the opposite side, some products are just terrible. Since nowadays China produces 35% of everything, you definitely are going to see lots of products at this end. But of course, there are still other contributors to the fake things in China, including 1, another part of Chinese people's collective personality. Chinese definitely are not the most honest people in the world, to put it nicely. 2, the art of war. Have you read the book? If you haven't, read it. It's a very thin book. You can finish in an hour. 3. Capitalism. This is the catalyst. 4. China is still learning how to control capitalism. The point I want to make in this chapter is that everything in this world is overwhelmingly complicated. It's very troublesome, but also could be fun to study it. So let's get into it. If I say Chinese people tend to be dishonest, it could be very offensive to most Chinese, but bear with me, because Chinese are also shockingly honest in some situations. To understand this complicated part of a Chinese collective personality, first we have to go back to history again. I mentioned many times that China has always been huge ever since the beginning. The size and the high unification lead to something that is unique in China, constant and a massive internal migration for thousands of years. People are always moving around inside China, and the government has no control of it. The reason for the migration are multiple. Natural disasters are one of them. Whenever a disaster happened, some people would die, and some would escape as refugees. And because this country is huge and unified, refugees could go anywhere freely. The second one is outsiders. Nomads from the north and the merchants from the west have been moving in and out of China for thousands of years. The third one is criminals. If you committed some serious crimes, let's say you murdered someone, you can choose to turn yourself in or you can just run away. When you live in a country that is so big, people call it where the sky covers, you literally can run to anywhere. Dozens of miles, hundreds of miles, or thousands of miles, your choice. How could the government catch you? It's still very difficult to do with modern technologies today. That's why FBI exists in America. And don't forget that people who have the guts to commit murders are definitely bold, so they have less trouble running away with their crimes. A famous Chinese novel, The Water Margin, tells the stories of a bunch of criminals moving around in China during the Song Dynasty. They are actually vigilantes. They committed crimes because the government is corrupted, so they have to seek justice on their own. This is kind of like the first superhero story in China. For example, Wu Song, the most popular character in the book, kills a tiger and then becomes a local hero. After his brother was murdered by his wife, Wu Song kills his sister-in-law and turns himself in. The mayor admires Wu Song as a hero who killed the tiger. So instead of punishing Wu Song by death, the mayor chooses to banish him. But you know what happens to superheroes? They don't look for troubles, but the troubles find them. In the new city, Wu Song is immediately in trouble. After he seeks justice on his own again, he beats up a local thug. But he doesn't know that this thug is protected by the local mayor. So the mayor tries to kill Wu Song. The plan backfires. Wu Song kills the mayor and the local thug. Then he simply runs away this time. And he is never caught by the government. So you can imagine living in this environment, the Chinese would have to encounter strangers from other parts of China all the time. And unfortunately, not all the murderers were superheroes. Not all the refugees are nice people. They move into your town or village as outsiders. They have no jobs. And they need to survive. So some of them would eventually begin to steal, to rob, to scam, or even to kill. Inevitably, Chinese developed a strong xenophobia. They don't trust the strangers and outsiders in general. To deal with the problem, Chinese even developed a philosophy for it. 害人之心不可有，防人之心不可无. It means never try to hurt others, but never let your guard down either. I want to call it the golden rule, but since the golden rule is already taken, so let's call it that diamond rule. This is the rule most Chinese follow in their entire lives. If you visit China one day and if you stop a stranger in the street for something like asking directions, you notice that they are always suspicious at first, trying to figure out your true intention. They would only drop their shields when they confirm that you have no bad intentions. If you ask strangers for their names in the street, I guess the Westerners would have less trouble telling you their real names, but Chinese would never do that. The diamond rule is deeply baked in Chinese people's minds, so Chinese are always super cautious facing strangers. And being dishonest became a defensive mechanism. Facing strangers, Chinese would never speak the truth about pretty much anything, to protect themselves from any unforeseeable troubles. But don't assume that there is no common social trust inside China. A society won't work without it. Chinese know most people are not bad people. If you can prove that you have no bad intentions by being sincere and polite in front of others, the barrier of distrust will be removed quite easily. And if you live in a small community with a small population, the trust among people could be astonishing. These videos show you how people simply leave their packages in public. Anybody could take them, but nobody does it. This is what happens right now all over the entire China. This is how confidently people trust each other in small communities. Some might say it's because there are cameras everywhere in China. But the truth is, people trusted each other in small communities ever since I was a little kid. Cameras only improve the trust. There's another example to show how honest the Chinese people could be in certain circumstances. In this video, an American man conducts a social experiment on Chinese street vendors. They pretend he speaks poor Chinese and pays more money than the vendors asked. 9 vendors all give the extra money back to him. Only one doesn't do it because he's too busy and doesn't notice what happens. Now, the art of war. Since China is always unified and the Chinese people are smart, so guess what people would do when they cannot kill each other? Well, they try to outsmart each other. Chinese didn't just write a book called The Art of War, they also followed the idea in the book faithfully. Of course, the book was actually written by Sun Tzu. And like many other thinkers back then, Sun Tzu was well aware that war was here to stay. He chose a different approach to make this world a better place. He encouraged the kings and the generals to fight war in a smarter way. He explicitly said in his book, all war is based on deception. He encouraged the military commanders to cheat, to make sure that the military commanders won't feel uncomfortable with that. He highlighted the purpose for doing so, and it was a noble one. He said, if you can win a war without fighting, that would be the best victory. In Chinese, he actually said, 善之善者也. 善, this character also means kindness. So what he said also can be translated as, that would be the kindest victory, or simply just, that would be the kindest thing to do. This is Sun Tzu's approach. He encouraged the military commanders to kill less people by using strategies, by outsmarting their enemies. For thousands of years, the art of war played a significant role in Chinese culture. People want to fight, regardless if the country is unified or not. That's our nature. So Chinese fought each other for real when the country was in a civil war. And they kept fighting each other with their intelligence when the country was in peace. That's why China is always a highly competitive environment. But since Chinese don't really like direct confrontations, people are inclined to fight each other in a covert way, and this is where the art of war shines. After thousands of years, Chinese became masters of deception. Foreigners probably have a little chance to see the real battles at all. So let me give you a hint. The fake smuggler story is a typical example how Chinese try to outsmart each other. Chinese people's dishonesty usually will be aroused when there is a loophole to be taken advantage of, which means they can release their intelligence. For most Chinese, taking advantage of other people's mistakes, ignorance, or stupidity is very satisfactory. It makes them feel smarter. But don't forget the bell curve. Not everyone is willing to go as far as to really hurt other people. The diamond rule is still in effect. Now, capitalism. I mentioned in previous chapters that capitalism is not a system, not an ideology. It's what happens when the size of the economy increases. Bigger economy, bigger opportunity, bigger profits, bigger temptations. Capitalism is a hotbed for greed and dishonesty. Actually, it has the power to amplify greed and dishonesty. I'm going to make this part short because I think it's obvious to everyone. And as China is still learning to control capitalism, because capitalism has the power to amplify greed and dishonesty, all the Western countries implemented strict laws and regulations onto the market. But China is still learning. The laws are still building. Loopholes are everywhere. The combination of dishonesty and greed finds a paradise in China. With 1.4 billion people in this country, it's guaranteed that lots of people will be using those loopholes to make them rich and hurt other people. That's where all the fake products came from. Even only 0.0001% of people in China are insatiably greedy, totally dishonest, and scrupulous and pure evil assholes. It's still 1,400 evil people who are eager to prey on gullible people with actual low prices as bait. They have plenty of victims. People are always attracted to actual low prices, like fish being attracted by bait. Living in China for 50 years, I learned my lessons the hard way. I bought terrible products many times. So nowadays, any extra low price is definitely a red flag for me. If you keep that in your mind, your chance of being a victim will be lowered significantly. But the most interesting feature of this phenomenon is that when the system is improved and the loopholes are sealed, the dishonesty will fade. Let me give you an example. I mentioned before that Chinese are bad drivers. One of the symptoms is that Chinese simply just hate seat belts and they refuse to wear them, kind of like Americans hate face masks, but for different reasons. I remembered many years ago when I was still in Beijing, one day I took a taxi. Back then the government had just begun to install cameras, so the driver and I both didn't wear seat belts. We were chatting casually. Then suddenly the driver was alarmed. He grabbed the seat belt and quickly put it in front of his chest, pretending that he was wearing it. Then he asked me to do the same. I had no idea what happened, so I asked. He pointed ahead and said, "There's a camera there." When we passed the camera, he immediately put his seatbelt away. Then he laughed proudly and said, "I know exactly where every camera is. That's how you beat them. So easy." Then the government installed more cameras. The loophole was sealed. You know what happened after that? Now, the first thing the drivers do is to fasten the seat belts after they get inside the cars. This chapter is not only about Chinese, it's about every group of people in this world. When we look at other people, we tend to focus on bad things, because bad things hurt us, so we must pay more attention to them. More details on this in the later chapters, but this psychology often leads to great misunderstanding. It gives us the impression that our society is all bad, people are all bad. But the reality is way more complicated than that. So I want to tell you a story at the end of this chapter. When I was about 10 years old and my parents moved, I was transferred to a new school. The first day in the school, I was scared sitting in the classroom with dozens of strangers. I didn't know how to blend in. I was a very shy kid. In the recess, when all the other kids were fooling around, I became even more scared. I didn't know what to do. So I sat in my chair motionless like a piece of stone. Then the boy saw me and the fear on my face. He walked to me and smiled. He said casually, "Hey, let me show you around." I followed him while he began to show me everything in the school. This is the playground, this is the restroom, this is where all the basketball are stored, this is the teacher's lounge. I didn't say anything. I just followed him around, walking slowly. But his words warmed my heart and dispelled the fear. Everything stopped being scary anymore, just a bunch of kids running, playing games, and laughing. When we returned to the classroom, other kids also began talking to me, and I spoke the first word since I entered the school. I thought about that boy quite often in my entire life. He reminds me that there are evil people in this world, but there are also angels in this world.